Hello, I'm Joshua Landis, the director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. And today we have a very exciting guest, Hussein Mousavian. He's a research scholar at Princeton. He's written 8 books, 3 of them in English. His 2 most recent books are The Iranian Nuclear Crisis and Iran and the U.S. He was, for 8 years, the head of the Foreign Relations Committee of Iran's Nuclear Council. And after that, he was spokesman for Iran in its nuclear negotiations with the EU. So, Hussein Mousavian, everybody's heard you on the radio, on TV recently. Welcome.
Thank you
for
Josh.
coming
Thank you.
to University of
My
Oklahoma.
pleasure. Thank you.
Let me start with a simple question. Recently, one of America's top retired military men, in signing a big petition against the Iran deal, said that Iran is the leading radical Islamic group in the world. Is that true? Is Iran the leading Islamic? Is that the way Americans should think of Iran?
I think internationally there is a clear consensus that the recent terrorism engulfing the whole Middle East, from Syria to Yemen to Afghanistan, everywhere, is ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the other groups like Boko Haram, Ahrar al-Sham. They are the most dangerous with the most radical version of Islam and extremism. Internationally, there is consensus that they are the number one threat to international peace, security, and stability. There is no dispute between the US, Europe, that these terrorists, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they are international threat number one. If you look at all this group with no exception, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Jabhat al-Nusra, Ahrar al-Sham, all of them, they are coming from the same school of thought, which is Wahhabism and Salafism, a version of Sunni extremism. I would not blame all Sunnis. I believe 90% of Sunnis are moderate. But these groups playing the game as the major threat to stability and peace in the region, they are all coming from one school of thought, which is Wahhabism. The root is in Saudi Arabia and other GCC countries, all US allies.
Now, what about Hezbollah? Of course, Americans will bring that up immediately.
Of course, but Hezbollah was created only because of Israeli invading Lebanon in 1980s, early 1980s. You remember?
82. Yes.
82.
I was living in Lebanon.
Israel invaded Lebanon, occupied Lebanon, killing thousands of Lebanese. Nobody was helping Lebanese. Hezbollah was created to fight invasion of Israel. Since then, Hezbollah has been only focused to defend integrity of Lebanon. It is just for integrity of Lebanon, to defend their independence, preventing Israeli invasion, which you remember during last 30, 40 years, frequently they have invaded Lebanon. It is different with Islamic State, ISIS, which they are claiming one Islamic world, and they want to rule all Islamic countries. Even they want to capture Saudi Arabia. They want to have a capital in Mecca and Medina, and they believe all Islamic countries, even the US allies, they believe they are all illegitimate, and they must go.
Now, let me bring this to the larger Shiite Sunni struggle taking place in the Middle East. Is this an ancient war that begins with the early Islam, or is this something new? How should we understand the struggle between Shiites and Sunnis today?
No one cannot deny the differences between Shia and Sunni. Traditionally, historically, we have had this problem. And we have the same, not that much high, between some Christian minorities, even between Jews minorities or sects. They are almost, we have the same problems. But today, the problem, I believe, really is not the conflict, the war in the region is not because of the fight between Shia and Sunni, because these terrorist groups, which we discussed before, they have killed more Sunni than Shia. They have killed the same amount of Christians, Kurds. Therefore, if they are killing Sunnis more than Shias, if they are killing Christians the same as Sunnis and Shias, you cannot consider a new war between Sunni and Shia. It is a new phenomena, a new school of thought from just a very minority radical version of Sunnis, Salafism, which is fighting Shia like fighting Christians, like fighting the other Sunnis. Exactly the same.
But in the Arab world, there is a dramatic change that's gone on with the Shiite awakening, with the Iranian Revolution in '79, when Ayatollah Khomeini stepped forward and said, we are going to protect and defend Shiites throughout the Arab world. And until that date, really, Shiites were the dirt farmers of the Arab world. Under the Ottoman Empire, for 400 or 500 years, Shiites didn't serve in the military, were discriminated against at a certain level. In Lebanon, Shiites were not a big factor in politics. The Alawites were the poorest people in Syria, contained in the Alawite mountains. They, of course, are going to claw their way to the top. We've seen the Shiites in Iraq take over the government, but before that, they were at the bottom of society. How, this modern sort of a Shiite awakening has been, of course, facilitated by Iran. And the Saudis, the Sunnis in the Middle East see Iran as an aggressor nation that has penetrated the Middle East and is changing the social order of the Middle East, and they say in a bad way. And that this is what has caused the war between Shiites and Sunnis. Is there any truth to that?
First of all, we need really to understand the root causes of Revolution 1979 in Iran. What was the root causes? Iran had a popular elected prime minister. His name was Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. The first elected leader democratically in whole Middle East. The US and the UK jumped in. They orchestrated a coup. They removed elected popular prime minister of Iran, and they installed Shah, a dictator. For a quarter of a century, the US and the West supported a corrupted dictator regime in Iran. Shah, no doubt about it. Shah had the worst human rights record based on Amnesty International reports. But the US was supporting the dictator. Iranian Revolution was in result of 25 years of dictatorship, corruption in Iran.
So let me ask you then.
Now,
let me just so is the Iran deal that's going through today a product of American weakness, in a sense that you've just described, that America, when it didn't like the regime in Iran in 1953 with the British, for $3 million, America could overthrow the elected government of Iran, put in the Shah of Iran, and for 26 years, they had a friendly power that they were able to impose because they put an entire blockade on Iran. No oil could leave Iran. Iranians became poor, they demonstrated against their government, and everything crumbled. Today, America's been trying to do something similar, which is to crush the economy of Iran with sanctions. But they haven't been able to put a blockade because it would drive price of oil up to $200 and it would hurt America too much. So in a sense, their inability to change the government in Iran, to crush them economically, is an expression of American weakness. Is that what this deal is about? Is that America no longer is strong enough to have its way in Iran?
Before I come to this question, Josh, let me address your second question. The Arab claims, or some American claims, Iran as an aggressive country in the region. First of all, I wanted to remind you that what was the root causes of Iranian Revolution? Who was responsible? And for what? Second, right after revolution, you remember, it was Iraq invaded Iran, yes. 1980. Revolution just happened late 1979. It was not Hezbollah, there was no nuclear, no terrorism, nothing, just a newborn revolution against dictatorship. An Arab country invaded Iran. All Arab countries in the region, except Syria and Libya, the US allies unanimously supported the aggressor. What was the objective of Saddam? First, bring regime change in Iran. Second, to disintegrate Iran. You remember, he yes. announced Khuzestan is a part Arab. Of Iraq, right? Who is aggressor? Iranians. Iranians have never invaded any country in the region during the last 200 years.
Of course, there were refugees, and Americans were completely stimulated about these refugees, but trying to punish Iran.
Arabs invaded Iran for 8 years, killing and injuring 1 million Iranians, displacing over 2 million Iranians, even using the weapons of mass destruction against Iran.
Saddam's use of chemical weapons.
Killing and injuring 100,000 Iranians. You remember, material technology was provided by the US and Europe for Saddam to use weapons of mass destruction against Iran. Therefore, this is really a wrong interpretation saying Iran is aggressive. Iran is the victim of Arab invasion. But I cannot deny today Iran is the most influential country in the region. They have influence in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, and Arabs are crying. But is it because of only strength and power of Iran, or corruption, dictatorship, unemployment, poverty in Arab countries? I believe Arabs first, they should blame themselves. You can find rarely a democratic Arab country in the region. Almost all are dictators during last 60 years, corrupted up to the end. Everyone knows. About 70% of Arab population in the region, they are youth, under 30, no job, unemployment, no home, they cannot marry, poverty. These are the real root causes of Arab world problems, not Iran. They want to mislead the realities. They want to mislead the public opinion in the world, blaming everything on Iran. But we should think who have supported for last 60 years dictators in the region. It was Iran or the US. Who has supported for last 60 years corruption? corrupted regimes in the region. It was Iran or the US. And all poverty, unemployment, undevelopment in the region is because of Iran or corrupted dictator regimes. As long as we are not going to address the realities, Josh, we would not be able to solve the problems in the Middle East. We cannot neither dismiss ourselves, mislead ourselves or even public opinion. You may be able to mislead your public opinion, in the US, but you know better than me, Josh. The US and Israel is the most hated country in Arab countries, in Arab streets. The US is not the most hated country in Iranian community, Iranian population. Polls just 2 years ago, 1 year ago again, showed 80% of Iranians, they like improvement relation with the US.
Why is that? I mean, the government in Iran is constantly saying America's bad, the great Satan. Why do the Iranian people like the US?
See, the government says the US is bad because they have 60 years of experience of supporting Shah as dictator, then supporting Saddam as aggressor, then putting sanctions, pressures, using weapons of mass destruction, and they have their own narrative why they cannot trust the US. But Iranians, the nation, they are mostly Western educated, you know.
The Iranian government, the highest number of cabinet members
Exactly.
graduated from American universities.
And the industry in Iran for decades has been more Western technology, except the sanctions imposed by the US and the other world powers since 2006. Chinese could take over overwhelming, over 50% of Iranian trade, industry, and technology. It was.
Let me interrupt you here, and it refocuses a little bit. America and President Obama is doing something pretty radical for our foreign policy, which is balancing Iran and Saudi Arabia, Shiites and Sunnis. Is this good for the United States? Is it good for the Middle East? How would you, how do you explain?
I think that the U.S. policy is gradually changing because of one big reality, Josh, or 2, 3 realities. Reality number one is the U.S. no more needs the oil energy of the region. Soon, the U.S. would be number one exporter of oil and gas. They would not need Saudi Arabia's oil. All U.S. policy in the region for last 60, 50 years was dominating energy. It was for energy. It was not for democracy. It was not for human rights. They were not taking care about anything. It was not important if Mubarak is a dictator over there for 40 years. They were supporting.
Right.
Because the core strategy of the U.S. was energy. One U.S. senator privately told me our religion was oil.
Right.
And it is true. Now the U.S. doesn't need oil, number one. Second, the U.S. failed 2 wars, Afghanistan and Iraq. The U.S. is not going to go to any new war putting money, treasure, and blood for problems in the Middle East because they don't need the oil. And then we have the Arab Spring. Everyone knows the Arab Spring has nothing to do with Iran. It is because of the problems within Arab countries, the fall of US allies, Mubarak, Ben Ali, Mubarak in Egypt, Ben Ali in Tunisia, and everyone knows even Saudi Arabia and other GCC countries are very vulnerable to the wave of the new terrorism and problems in the Middle East. And the US understand very well they cannot manage Middle East anymore, and they are not going to invest money and treasure anymore, even.
So the U.S. needs Iran, a stable country.
The U.S. needs
As an
to
ally.
change their strategy first. And I believe Obama is changing the strategy because of the issues I just mentioned. Now we go to the region. If you look at the region, the two most stable, powerful countries with history, civilization, human resources as a real big nations, three I would say, are Iran, Egypt, Turkey. The rest just have been created, just some decades ago. They are more artificial. That's why they are very vulnerable. Egypt needs at least 10 years to come back. You know the problem in Egypt.
Deep economic problems.
Turkey, because of wrong Erdogan policies during last 4 or 5 years, they are getting problem. I believe they would be able to resist. They are powerful. They would be able to manage, but they need 4, 5, 6 years to deal with the problems they have. It is not only PKK. This is with the Sunni extremist terrorists, which they are already in Turkey. They have already done some explosion, and I think they would have some more. Therefore, Iran is now the most stable, powerful country with huge influence and role in the region. And the US practically is number one international power still in the region. Therefore, there is a clear understanding for Washington and Tehran that if we are supposed to have peace and stability in the region, there is no other option for Tehran and Washington to cooperate. Fortunately, Tehran and Washington, despite of all animosities, they have been supporting the same government in Kabul and Baghdad, in Afghanistan and Iraq. Since 2001 and 2003, Iran and the US, they are supporting the same governments in Baghdad and in Afghanistan. They supported Karzai and the new president, and they are supporting a principle practically which could be used for the other countries in the region. They are supporting the principle of the rule of majority, power sharing, the rights of minorities.
Let me.
It means
on Syria.
I will
Yeah,
come to
okay.
Syria. It means in Afghanistan, Pashtun Sunni majority is president. The second man is Tajik Shia. In Iraq, Shia is majority, 65%. The prime minister is Shia, speaker of parliament is Sunni. It is a good principle already. Iran and the US, they have jointly, indirectly created such a foundation and mechanism, and they are supporting the same principles in Afghanistan and Iraq. This can be used, Josh, for Syria. This can be used for Yemen. I mean, I believe for peaceful crisis management in the region, we need some principles to agree between the regional powers and the world powers. And it cannot be anything other than the rule of majority, power sharing, rights of minority, free election. This is the 4 principles. Then, if we can agree on these principles, then everyone should put all efforts to fight terrorism and to go for managing the crisis within this framework, including Syria and Yemen.
Well, on that hopeful note, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Josh.
And talking about the Middle East.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.